Well, for the third consecutive season, the Tampa Bay Lightning have been bounced from the playoffs in the first round. It is the second straight year the Bolts have lost to the Panthers in 5 games. A lot of fans out there are wondering, what do we make of this Tampa Bay Lightning franchise? And I first need to get this off my chest because there is a lot of anger. There is a lot of frustration out there from the fan base. And I totally understand. You live on this high for so long, going to the Stanley Cup Finals for 3 straight years. And then for 3 straight years after that, you can't even get out of the first round. It makes you feel like you're stagnant. Totally understand all those frustrations. Nikita Kucherov and his inability against the Panthers to get going, that is something we certainly need to analyze with what is the problem there. Fair critiques. The power play. Why was it so poor against the Panthers and so successful in the regular season? A top 5 unit in the regular season, and then they finally snapped their skid in Game 5. They went 0 for 15 in a stretch before Jake Gensel finally scored. So that is also another fair critique. But when we look at the rosters, here's the thing. The Florida Panthers are just a better team. That's not even factoring in that Brandon Hagel didn't play in 2 of these games, essentially. He got injured. Oliver Bjorkstrand, who Julien Brisebois acquired at the trade deadline, got injured before we entered the playoffs, so we didn't even understand how he was going to factor into the equation, considering the team desperately needed some scoring depth on this team and did not really have it in this series against the Panthers. One thing is very clear, the Panthers are a heavy team. They dominated on the forecheck. They remind me of the Tampa Bay Lightning a few years ago when they were going to a handful of Stanley Cup Finals. This is just the ebbs and flows of how it goes in sports. There was a time where the Florida Panthers were a good team and they could not get past the Tampa Bay Lightning no matter what they did. They made a drastic decision acquiring Matthew Tkachuk. They traded guys like Huberdeau, who came off, it was like an 80-assist type of year. It was an amazing year. Mackenzie Weegar as well. They made a heavy investment into a guy like Matthew Tkachuk that hopefully he would be the guy that gets him over the hump. Sergei Bobrovsky also turned it around. That was looking like an awful contract until it wasn't. He has been some sorts of awesome against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And away they went. They tinkered the roster. They were able to figure it out. And also the Lightning were hit with a flat cap. And their roster started to deteriorate a little bit. And not with the headliners, but with the Barclay Goodrows, with the Blake Colemans, with the Yanni Gourds, with the Alex Killorns, with the Andre Palats. Those are the guys that really made the Tampa Bay Lightning into a perennial powerhouse. Well, Nikita Kucherov and Braden Point and Steven Stamkos when he was here, Victor Hedman, all these guys, Anthony Cirelli, Eric Chernak, right? All these guys are so important to the fabric of that story. But you need to be 4 lines deep. And right now in this series, it looked like they're missing a line or two. Certainly a 3rd line. They missed that Gourde, Goudreau, Coleman type of line on this team. So that's what they're going to have to figure out. The good thing is with Julien Brisebois is he has options. He can either run it back with minimal damage to this roster. While they're not swimming in money, they have more money entering the offseason than they've had in quite some time, considering the only people that they would have to re-sign are guys like Yanni Gourde, Luke Glendening, Nick Perbix, Jonas Johansson, and Cam Atkinson. Those are the 5 unrestricted free agents. Everybody else, they're signed into next season. So that's good. Then Julien has to decide if this is the roster that can get them over the hump. A lot of fans soon forget that in 2019, the Bolts were the heavy favorites in that series against the Columbus Blue Jackets, and that was frustrating and disappointing and humiliating and embarrassing. Everyone wanted John Cooper fired, Julien Brisebois, all this stuff. They ran it back the next season. They won the Cup. They won the Cup again, and they almost did it a 3rd time. Every year is a new year. And it's not that the Tampa Bay Lightning are a bad team. The Florida Panthers are still just a much better team. And they have to figure out how to bridge the gap. And I think it's abundantly clear that the Bolts need to build a roster to beat the Panthers. And then they can start figuring out how they can maybe make a possible Stanley Cup run and beating some other teams in the mix. Because unless they can beat the Panthers or the Toronto Maple Leafs, who, by the way, they struggled with against all in the regular season, unless they can figure out how to beat those 2 teams because they're going to run into them in the first round with this playoff format, then it's all for naught. So we know Julien Brisebois is ruthless in his decision-making because he wants to win. He does what is best for the franchise. We learned that last season when he parted ways with Steven Stamkos. The entire fan base wanted him back. I also said that he should be back. There's an argument to say that he was desperately missed on the power play in this series. But when you look at Jake Gensel, man, was he impressive too. And he signed a long time and he's younger, and it's hard to say that Gensel at this point isn't a better player than Steven Stamkos. So we have to have faith that Julien Brisebois is going to make the necessary moves, and we also can't say that this team is moving backwards or forwards or stagnant. It just all depends. The Carolina Hurricanes have won a first-round matchup for 7 straight years. They haven't made it to a cup final. The LA Kings can't seem to beat the Edmonton Oilers. The New York Rangers for decades have not figured it out. They've been to like one cup, and they've been to a handful of Eastern Conference finals. You know, they ran into a Bolts team a couple of times that have knocked them out. Even last year, they made it to an Eastern Conference final just to not even make the playoffs this year. It can go way south way quicker than you think, but it can also go north in an instant. And that's sometimes what just happens. Look at the Colorado Avalanche. They're a team that everyone yelled at was not meeting their mark. Then all of a sudden they surged, won the cup. They beat the Bolts here inside Amalie Arena. And now they might get bounced again for the last few years with Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar, Martin H. All these guys who are really, really good. And why is that? Because the playoffs are just a bit random sometimes. And you got to bring your best multiple rounds, multiple games, and there are other teams on the other side who also have things clicking as well. And I can run through a million examples of this, but ultimately, one year doesn't dictate the other. The window is not closed. The Bolts still have the top-end talent, but they need to fill out the bottom of the roster. I think they have to fix the bottom 6 and finding some 5-on-5 scoring production there to really fill it out. And I think they need to get more physical, bigger, better on the forecheck, because they were bullied a little bit in this series. And while we certainly love players like Brandon Hagel, Anthony Cirelli, Yanni Gourde, Braden Point, you know, they are smaller, shiftier, quicker guys. They're just not going to be, you know, able to hold up on some of these forechecks. So those are going to be some of the decisions that have to be made moving forward. I think that the team last year from the Tampa Bay Lightning, despite the same result, was not as good as this team. Love the defense from this squad for most of the season. All right, they maybe have to fine-tune one piece there on the blue line, but I think they're all right. They have figured out what they want to do defensively. Now, and as silly as it sounds for scoring the most goals in the NHL this season, they have to find that depth. They got to find ways to get more production from the bottom, and ultimately, when they get back in this position again, because the Bolts will be back in this position again, they got to find a way to spark that magic again. I can't explain to you why they haven't won on home ice in a while. They're now 1-9 in their last 10 games inside Amalie Arena. At the head scratcher. They really need to play with a sense of urgency and find a little bit more juice than they ever have before. And, you know, after they lost to the Maple Leafs, you can kind of write that off as they were due, right? They made it to 3 straight cups. It was a hard-fought series. They ended up losing to the Maple Leafs. Hey, it happens. Last year against the Panthers, they were the Stanley Cup winners. They were far and away the better team. Hey, we weren't ready. This one, after talking with the players, after listening to John Cooper, this one stings because they thought this was a team ready to compete with the Panthers, and then they went out there and they were not as close as they thought they were. So that is going to be a huge motivating factor entering next season, because some of that other stuff maybe you can rationalize, but now I think the juices are starting to churn. So we'll see what happens. It was another fantastic season of Lightning hockey. I know it doesn't seem like it right now, but this team continues to impress, and the way that Julien Brisebois has navigated these waters through the flat cap, and now the cap will climb, and the Bolts will have more money to maybe acquire some more talent. They continue to be a favorable destination. We'll see what happens. But I think we are a long way away from saying that the window to a Stanley Cup final has closed, but these next 2 to 3 years, especially the next 2 with Kucherov under contract, are pivotal. So Julien Brisebois has to act quickly, because Who knows what's going to happen from there?